Hello and welcome to the New Generation Project. My name is Stuart Brooks, I'm joined by Adam Wykes.
Hello.
And Paul Scrivens.
Hiya.
And we'll be documenting that forgotten period of the WWF between the Hulkamania era and the Attitude Era. This leaves a gap between the years of 1993 and 1998, which sees a massive amount of change in the World Wrestling Federation. What we will attempt to do in this show is to connect those two dots. How do Vince and company get from Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior to Steve Austin and The Rock? It isn't exactly a smooth transition, and there are times in this period where it feels like a process that they are throwing shit at the wall and seeing whatever sticks, and believe me, there is a lot of shit. In the Hulkamania era, they get the Mega Powers exploding, Hogan versus The Warrior and Savage versus Steamboat. In the Attitude Era, they get Mankind versus The Undertaker, Hell in a Cell, Steve Austin dousing the Corporation in beer, and Steve Austin versus The Rock. What we get is Mabel main eventing SummerSlam, Mabel winning the King of the Ring, and, well, Mabel on pay-per-view. So for me, this is the period I grew up with. My first pay-per-view I watched was WrestleMania 8, which was very much one of the endings of the Hulkamania era. I watched through from about 1992 to 1995, so I'm only kind of massively familiar with half of this, so it'll be interesting to see from my perspective, was there anything in particular which made me switch off? Adam, do you want to give us a bit of a background on what you've watched and your interests?
I started off with the Hulkamania era, really back in the late 80s. Definitely remember a load of stuff from 89 and 90. Distinctly remember WrestleMania 6. And then I kind of fell out of it, and I think I fell out of it before Hogan had gone. Hogan was still knocking around. In fact, I think the Warrior was still knocking around when I was actually still watching it, and then I kind of fell out of it for a while. And I missed all of this, really. I think I'm aware of some of the stuff that happened in it, and then started watching again during Attitude in probably 99, I would guess, is when I first got back into it.
And how about you, Paul?
I'm aware of some of the people in it, but like Adam, I've not really seen very much of this at all. I know people like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, but really haven't seen a lot of the matches from this era, so I'm looking forward to seeing how it's different from the product that I watched, which was generally stuff from later on, stuff from kind of 99 to 2000 onwards.
Well, I'm an unashamed Bret Hart fan, always have been, always will be, so it's going to be quite interesting for me to try and look back on this objectively and see whether, he was actually any good in this era and what he contributed, and does he deserve to be taken in the same stratosphere as Hogan, Rock, Austin, Warrior?
Well, when I was watching it, I remember the Hart Foundation as a tag team with Jim Neidhart, and then when I started watching it again, Bret had had his singles run and that had gone. So I had references back to Bret Hart having a big singles run and being champion and all this sort of stuff, but I never really saw any of that because I remember him just challenging for tag titles.
And I suppose for you, Paul, you remember Shawn Michaels as a sort of revered legend latterly.
Yes.
Brown pants.
Yes, in the Elimination Chamber.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a massive fan of Shawn Michaels, but I've heard about some of his earlier dealings and that he's a very different character when he came back in 2002 to how he was earlier on, so I'm not sure how I'm going to like him compared to my HBK.
Excellent. As a starting point, we've chosen King of the Ring 1993. The main reason being that this pay-per-view is Hogan's last TV appearance until 2002. And as an ending point, we will see WrestleMania 14, which takes us directly from the last day of Hulk Hogan's last world title reign to the first day of Steve Austin's first title reign, directly from point A to point B. So, to give you a bit of a background on where the World Wrestling Federation was in 1993, its roster had changed dramatically over the course of 1992. A large amount of the big stars of the late 80s and early 90s left during that year. Hogan was gone following WrestleMania 8, as was Jake the Snake Roberts, Sid Vicious and Rowdy Roddy Piper. The Legion of Doom's last pay-per-view was the following SummerSlam 1992, and the British Bulldog disappeared after losing the Intercontinental title just prior to the Survivor Series. Former WWF heavyweight champion Ric Flair was gone by the end of January 1993, and another big Hulkamania era star, the Big Boss Man, followed suit in March. Perhaps the biggest name left in the company, Macho Man Randy Savage, was moved to the announce desk as 1993 opened, as WWF owner Vince McMahon felt that Savage was too old, a sentiment that the Macho Man seemed not to share. So those, I imagine, Adam, a lot of the guys you remember as the big stars.
Yeah, pretty much all the guys that you just mentioned there were the main people when I was watching it. And now they've all buggered off. So it's interesting to see what's left. And the people that appear to be left were lower card people, tag competitors, as mentioned. Shawn Michaels there, I remember him as the Rockers. And I think I remember the Rockers splitting, but I remember much of any sort of singles run from them. So yeah, it's watching it again with, you know, the big people from the past gone and the lower card people now are at the top, which is a little bit strange. But
Okay, the reason for some of these departures can perhaps be attributed to the summer of 1991 trial of one Dr. George Sahorian. Not a name that rings a bell?
I've read articles where that kind of name has been mentioned, but I really find it hard to contextualise it, not knowing the wrestling at the time.
is he our steroid pusher?
Yes, Zahorian was a Pennsylvania doctor who was convicted of distributing steroids and other drugs, an offence under the US Federal Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988 to a number of WWF wrestlers at live events between the years of 1979 and 1989, a period of time in which the WWF can very easily be described as being size obsessed. Just take a look at the physiques of people like some of the names we mentioned, the Sid Vicious, Legion of Doom, Ultimate Warrior, and then other people like Hercules, the Warlord.
Oh, yeah, Barbarian.
Just these huge guys. In Zahorian's trial, Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper were named as his customers. This, of course, led to a ton of bad publicity for McMahon and Company, who had cultivated a heavy family-friendly image throughout the 1980s. Whilst Vince himself would come under trial for steroid distribution in July 1994, the WWF made a clear effort to push performers who looked less like the roided-up monsters of old. At the forefront of this movement was Bret Hart, who after a strong showing in the main event of SummerSlam 92 against the British Bulldog was pushed to main event status and won the title from Ric Flair on October the 12th, 1992, in a match that bizarrely wasn't shown on television but was later made available as part of a home video release. Portrayed as a hard-working champion, the made-up phrase "fightingest champion ever" was often used to describe him. Bret's reign was characterised by strong TV matches, something you didn't get from the Hogans and the Warriors. However, the departure of the aforementioned stars left Bret without a long list of credible challengers, or at the very least former main event superstars to give Bret a rub as a top player. His first title defence on pay-per-view was against new Intercontinental Champion Shawn Michaels, who whilst having been pushed heavily during 1992 had not even been a single star for a full year and was not yet a credible main event act. Samoan Rodney Anoa'i was introduced in late 1992 as Japanese sumo wrestler Yokozuna and treated as a traditional WWF-style monster heel in the vein of Andre, Bundy, Earthquake before him, and certainly felt like the kind of foe that would have been built up to face Hulk Hogan during his world title reigns. He was the first recipient of the now traditional winner of the Royal Rumble gets a world title shot at WrestleMania stipulation when he last eliminated Randy Savage in the 1993 edition of the match. Also in a prominent position on the Rumble 93 card, facing world champion Hart, was former WCW mid-carder Scott Hall, who was portraying a character he pitched himself to Vince McMahon, Razor Ramon, a Cuban street thug taking huge inspiration from Al Pacino's Tony Montana in the 1983 film Scarface. Bam Bam Bigelow, who had had a brief babyface run in the WWF in the late 1980s, returned after several years in Japan and made his pay-per-view re-debut in the 1993 Rumble, defeating one of the few leftovers of the Hogan era, the Big Boss Man. Another big debut on this card was that of Rick and Scott, the Steiner brothers, a long-time WCW tag team who had joined the Federation in December 1992. And finally, also in from WCW, and latterly the World Bodybuilding Federation, was Lex Luger. Despite the move away from the bodybuilder physiques, Lex's debut was heavily promoted and we'll see a lot of him going forward. Another big change in the WWF at the beginning of 1993 was the launch of Monday Night Raw on the USA Network. Initially taped at the Manhattan Center in downtown New York, Raw differed from other WWF programming of the time, being taped in front of a smaller audience and playing out as a beginning-to-end story-type show rather than unconnected superstar versus jobber matches. Raw still featured the aforementioned type of matches, but you would usually get at least one star versus one star match. Not the pay-per-view main event-esque showings you would get during the Monday Night Wars, but certainly more than televised wrestling fans were used to at the time. A match such as the Mr. Perfect versus Ric Flair loser leaves the WWF match from the 21st of January episode would have never been shown on Superstars had it not been on pay-per-view. It would certainly have been saved for something like a Saturday night's main event, yet here it was on weekly episodic television. With the exodus of the huge stars and the cloud of the steroid scandal, crowd size and pay-per-view buy rates were down. WrestleMania 8, which originated at the Hoosier Dome in Indiana, housed a crowd of 62,167 and a pay-per-view buy rate of 2.8. Compare that to WrestleMania 9, which is held in what is essentially a parking lot outside Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, in front of 16,891 people with a 2.3 buy rate. The downward trend for WrestleMania buys would continue for several years to come. The main star of the Hulkamania era, Hogan, had disappeared from the WWF following a disqualification win in the main event of WrestleMania 8 over Sid Vicious. He returned to the WWF on a February episode of Raw, a week after his longtime friend Brutus Beefcake had made his return against Ted DiBiase and been the victim of an attack with a metal briefcase to his injured face. Hogan and Beefcake faced WWF Tag team champions DiBiase and IRS at WrestleMania 9 and lost via disqualification, as the story goes that Hogan believed he was too big for the tag team titles. Later that night, following the world title match between Bret Hart and Rumble winner Yokozuna, which Yoko had won following his manager Mr. Fuji throwing salt into the eyes of Hart whilst he had his finishing move the sharpshooter on the challenger, Hogan appears to aid Bret and in can what only be described as a move of massive cuntishness. Hogan instantly challenges the clearly out of breath new champion and proceeds to leg drop and pin the Federation's new massive built up wonder monster heel in a whopping 22 seconds. At this point, as far as Bret was concerned, the plan was for Hogan to drop the title back to him in a passing of the torch type moment. However, Hogan had other plans and, depending on whom you believe, either refused to give back to Bret or was scheduled to trade the belt back to Yokozuna anyway, leading to our title match for this show.
What is the King of the Ring? You know, where did it come from? Because I don't remember this in the 80s.
Well, I remember, I mean, the King of the Ring for me just shouts Hell in a Cell, Mankind, Undertaker. That's kind of my knowledge.
That's kind of like, where now King of the Ring's been taken in
yes,
you know, how people think about it.
But really, what I know of that pay-per-view is the two main events, the Hell in a Cell and the First Blood.
Rather than the tournament.
Yeah, so I know it's a tournament, but I don't know the details of how it works. So
okay. I mean, I was thinking like the 2002, the Kurt Angle. Not the one that Kurt Angle wins, but the one where he fights Shane.
2001.
Is that what it is? Yeah. You know, that was obviously part of the tournament because you just get low Kurt Angle matches, which is a good thing.
And obviously, these days, the King of the Ring is a random episode of Raw that they wheel out every couple of years.
Yeah, and
it doesn't really mean a lot.
And it's not always really a good thing to be the King of the Ring, is it? You know,
No.
I think Booker T ran with it and did all right, but I think it really was a kick in the balls for Sheamus. It was not a good thing at all for him. So where did it come from? What's it all about?
The King of the Ring gimmick had existed in the World Wrestling Federation since around 1985. Its first winner was The Rock Don Muraco. Since that time, it was mostly traded in the same way as a title, passing between Muraco, Harley Race, Haku, Jim Duggan, and one you'll probably remember, the Macho King Randy Savage.
Oh yeah, we do like him.
Confusingly, the single elimination tournament format was also contested on untelevised house shows as late as 1991, when it was won by Bret Hart.
Ah, interesting.
In 1993, King of the Ring was the first new addition to the pay-per-view calendar since the Royal Rumble in 1989.
So at this point, how many pay-per-views a year are they actually on?
Just the big four. You've got your Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam and Survivor Series. As for the tournament itself on this show, as the former world champion, Bret was entered into the quarterfinals of the tournament automatically, whilst across Raw and other WWF programming, the following occurred. Razor Ramon defeated Tito Santana, Mr. Perfect defeated Doink the Clown on a third attempt, Mr. Hughes defeated Kamala, Jim Duggan defeated Papa Shango, Bam Bam Bigelow defeated Typhoon, Lex Luger defeated Bob Backlund, and Tatanka defeated Giant Gonzalez.
Tatanka? Is it not Tatanka?
It's Tatanka.
They used to pronounce it differently when it came back.
But can you imagine a reverse tournament here where you've got a King of the Ring tournament in 1993 comprised of Tito Santana, Doink the Clown, Kamala, Papa Shango, Typhoon, Bob Backlund and Giant Gonzalez?
That would in many ways be better.
I almost wish we could watch that.
Yeah. I want to see more matches with Papa Shango, but I really don't think we're going to see any, are we?
Sadly, we don't. As an extra kick in the teeth, he was on the dark match before this show, defeating Owen Hart, successfully defending his USWA Heavyweight Championship. So this is it. It's June the 13th, 1993, and we are live from the Nutter Centre in Dayton, Ohio, before a crowd of 6,500.
Did I hear that right? The Nutter Centre?
The Nutter Centre.
Is this crowd figure a real crowd figure or a WE crowd exaggeration?
Well,
you wouldn't really you wouldn't really exaggerate that number, but is this actually an accurate one?
I believe so, but 6,500, ouch.
Yeah,
that's a step down from your Mania 3s and your Mania 8s crowd. So we open the show with Vince's voice announcing the first ever King of the Ring. 8 of the toughest superstars in the World Wrestling Federation will face off to determine the undisputed King of the Ring. Vince runs down the opening round matches and we go straight to our host Jim Ross at ringside with Randy Savage and Bobby Heenan. They hype the non-tournament title matches. Savage claims Hogan wants to defend his title in the heartland of America, and Heenan says that Michaels will destroy Crush. So Jim Ross is here.
Oh, I've got to say, this is the first thing that I was like, this is amazing, because there's your commentary team and it's Jim Ross, Bobby Heenan and Macho Man. There's no bad there. You know, if you compare that to something like old Jerry Lawler, Booker T and Michael Cole, I mean, this is actually really, really quite good, isn't it?
Believe it or not, the opinion on Macho Man's commentary differs. Some people love it, some people hate it.
Well, I was going to mention that as I go through, he's such a powerful character that it can provide somewhat of a distraction from the actual.
He's got a really high volume, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He just seems to be really loud all the time.
He grabs your attention.
But he doesn't talk an awful lot. he's not, he's not rattling on in it. It's mainly just Jim Ross going at 1,000 miles an hour all the way through.
So how is this for both of you? Your main experience of Jim Ross will be from the Attitude Era, post Bell's palsy.
It's the same voice, but it's different. It's quicker and it's slightly higher in pitch, because I think as he got older and his health complications, he gained more sort of like gravel in his voice and more distinction.
I found this slightly harder to follow. You mentioned that the pace is pretty quick.
He does. He rocks on at a fair old whack. Yeah.
You sometimes just need a moment to let things just sink in, and actually, obviously, that's a development of his commentary, that he slows down a little bit and lets you digest what he's actually saying.
How long had he been with them at this point? Was he fairly new, or had he been around for a while?
This was only his second World Wrestling Federation pay-per-view. He debuted in a toga, nonetheless, at WrestleMania 9.
So he's still a really bit green then, as far as this company is concerned.
Absolutely.
And the job that he's doing.
So where did he come from? What's he been doing before then?
His background, he got into wrestling in the late 70s as a referee, later worked as an announcer for Bill Watts in Mid-South, and obviously in WCW latterly.
Wow, I can't imagine Jim Ross as a ref. That's amazing.
Our first match is Bret Hart versus Razor Ramon. Razor Ramon debuted in late 1992 and was pushed strongly as a heel, but recently, on the 17th of May edition of Monday Night Raw, lost in an upset to The Kid, a.k.a. the 1-2-3 Kid, a.k.a. X-Pac, a.k.a. Sean Waltman.
Good old anus ripper himself.
Did you pick up on the 1-2-3 chance?
I did wonder what had happened there. Because they kind of reference it a little bit, don't they, in the commentary as he's walking through. Yeah.
Basically, The Kid had turned up on Raw for several weeks as just a nondescript jobber, losing random matches, but pins Razor in an upset on, the May 17th edition of Raw. This would eventually lead to a babyface turn for Razor, but for now, he's still a heel, being wound up by the crowd's chants of 1-2-3. This is actually a rematch of the World Championship match from the Royal Rumble in January, where Ramon challenged Bret for his world title.
They talk about Bret being the number one seed. So what is the seeding system for this tournament?
There is no seeding system.
Okay, I'm shocked. They've been lying to me.
You have been lied
never
to.
Do that.
Oh.
Yes, they briefly mention in the opening match that Bret is the number one contender. As I said, he was entered automatically into the tournament on the basis of being the former world champion.
Okay, we'll make up the rest of the seeding systems we get.
Yeah, if you want to, create your own seedings, go for it.
Okay.
Where does Jim Duggan sit?
8.
So Razor Ramon enters to a decent round of boos and the chants of 1-2-3 Kid, and Ross says he may never live them down. Ross tells us that the first round matches have a 15-minute time limit, semi-finals 30 and final 60 minutes 1-4 to a finish. Pretty big pop for Bret?
Really, really big, actually. I thought that was pretty good. Because I'm not used to like when Bret Hart would come at him getting such like a rousing response really from people.
Yeah, and it's hard to judge at the minute until we kind of get further through the pay-per-view how good a pop it is, because with the size of the crowd and what you're used to these days from the more recent tapings, it's hard to get a feel for it. But it was a good response.
But he looks the part, doesn't he? Bret Hart, I dare say, from the time that I used to watch him, like in the interim period, he's been sort of like having world championship matches. He's used to sort of like the bigger stage, and he kind of just looks, in the way that he's sort of stylised and the way that he walks, he kind of looks like he's the main man, doesn't he?
He looks like a star.
Yeah.
I think what we'll come to see over the course of what we're doing is that Bret is the WWF's Mr. Reliable. When other things don't work, or other people don't work, or they need someone to get a belt from one person to another, Bret's the guy they go to. They run down Bret's titles as he comes out. 2-time Intercontinental Champion, 2-time Tag Champion, and former World Champion. But Heenan predicts that Razor will pick up the win. The announcers discuss the 1-2-3 Kid. Heenan attempts to get over that Bret has been wrestling his whole life, talks about how he'll kick out in a hotel room if the time is 1:23 in the morning.
I do like the fact that just after this point, I think it is, that Macho Man says that the time limit is the same for both of the competitors, which I thought was very...
I don't quite know how you'd apply different time limits.
It's a very astute obviousation by Macho Man.
Yes, that's
clearly on the case.
Yeah, it added something to the pay-per-view for me.
I quite like the look of Razor Ramon as well. I don't think I really remember seeing him wrestle. I don't like his attire. His attire looks silly.
I like it.
No, the green and the yellow, it's horrible.
His colour scheme varies.
And his really shiny green boots. No, it's just I don't like it.
For me, I think he's got. He as another person really looks like a star. Looks like he should be, at the top of the card.
I'm just not sure they're main event pants really.
I'm going to disagree with you there.
I just don't like the colour of it.
Well, like I say,
he looks good. He looks like really, really sleazy and greasy.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I think that's great characterisation. I like that.
It's just this sort of like the lime green and yellow.
Are they not threatening enough for you?
No, exactly. It's a bit too Coco Beware. It's a bit too like nice and sunny. You need something a bit darker.
Well, maybe that's then slightly to do with the fact he is in the process of turning face, perhaps.
Maybe. I'll. That's just my initial response anyway. We'll see how we go with him.
At one point in the contest, Heenan asks Ross and Savage for their predictions. Macho goes with the Hitman or Perfect, but Heenan pushes him to choose one and he picks Perfect. He asks Ross, who begins with, I don't know, but before he can finish, Heenan quips, of course you don't, you're from Oklahoma. Ross no-sells it. There's a slightly different dynamic between Jim Ross and Bobby Heenan than there was, which you'll probably remember, Adam, between Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan.
Yeah.
He would, respond with the will you stop, will you be serious, that kind of thing, whereas Ross, very often in this pay-per-view,
just ignores him
just
and carries on.
Sandbags his quips and carries on, and Macho repeating that it's irrelevant information that the brain is coming out with. At various points in the contest, we get crowd chants of 1, 2, 3, which Razor does respond well to, selling kind of irritation from them. He hits his sack of shit fall away slam for a 2. Later on, we go to the standard Bret Hart routine.
What's a sack of shit fall away slam?
It's just a fall away slam, but allegedly the clique referred to it as the sack of shit.
Harsh.
Oh, no, not the performance of the move, just as if you are throwing away a sack of shit.
In that case, that's fine.
And I know all these days we loathe Cena's 5 moves of doom, but Bret very much has his own repertoire, which you best get used to.
Yeah, but all the moves are done with proficiency.
Yes.
The problem is, like, Cena's got 5 moves that he does poorly. If you've got 5 moves that you do well, that's alright,
Oh, yeah, don't get me wrong. Bret's backbreaker in particular is a thing of beauty. So for the finish, Razor sets up for the Razor's Edge, but Bret slides out and goes for the backslide, but Razor is too strong. He pushes off the turnbuckle and flips to Ramon's front before grabbing an inside cradle for a 2. Decent pop for that.
That was a great move. Really
absolutely.
enjoyed that sequence. I thought that should have been the end of the match.
That should have been the end of the match.
Bret argues with the referee and crowd boos the 2. Razor clubs Bret from behind, sets him up on the top rope for a back suplex, but Bret counters it by falling on top of Razor and gets the 3 at 10:25. Razor sells frustration after. Yeah. I think I'll agree with both of you that the inside cradle should have been the finish.
Yeah. The actual finish was just not quite executed right.
It was a bit loose, wasn't it? It was...
And it ended up looking a little clumsy, and that spoilt it somewhat for me.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, a good match. Quite enjoyed it. But yeah, the finish was just a bit damp.
Yeah, as a match, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good opener. I just kind of one thing that I noticed during it is that the way that Razor went off the ropes, it kind of really lacked purpose. He kind of almost walked into the ropes and really kind of going into them.
Kind of
nonchalant. He gained no momentum from doing it. it was just, okay, I'm going to walk a little bit further.
I think that's kind of his character. But yeah, it's definitely a unique way of running the ropes. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a decent opener. It's got 2 people that the crowd care about in. It's got a decent pace to it. And okay, the finish isn't great, but there's some good sequences in there. And yeah, perhaps if it had finished on the inside cradle, it'd have been a bit better. So next up, we get some footage from Superstars airing a confrontation between The Undertaker and Mr. Hughes and Giant Gonzalez.
And now this was very exciting for me because I remember Giant Gonzalez.
I hadn't got a clue.
It's a big man in a monkey suit.
I had no idea what was going on.
Well, luckily for you, Paul, we will get a Giant Gonzalez match on the podcast.
But one thing that I really didn't know, obviously I remember Giant Gonzalez, I know Harvey Whippleman, who was knocking around. Who the hell is Mr. Hughes? Where did he come from?
He's been around for a while. He's been in the USWA. He's been in WCW. And yes, he was brought in as a charge of Harvey Whippleman. He's not around for much longer. You don't need to worry about him a great deal. He does get a further 2 chances in the World Wrestling Federation as a bodyguard for Hunter Hearst Helmsley in 1997. And as a bodyguard for Chris Jericho in 1999.
Wow.
Shortly after his debut.
So have I seen him before then? But
Very possibly.
As a Jericho bodyguard?
The most amusing thing I can think of about him is a story Jericho tells in what I believe is his second book, that he actually had narcolepsy and would often fall asleep either while he was in a sleeper hold or while he was stood at ringside.
That's some good selling there.
Quite a dangerous condition for a wrestler.
Oh, absolutely. When you saw him, did you think Black IRS? with the suspenders, tie, and
he's
suit
wearing
trousers.
like braces and
It's like
It's kind of already done that with someone else. Why is this guy there? And what was it? What was the feud with the Undertaker? What was his beef with the Undertaker?
that was more to do with Giant Gonzalez, who Harvey Whippleman also managed. So it's kind of a joint feud with Harvey Whippleman and whoever he manages against the Undertaker. It briefly continues on television, and Mr. Hughes briefly has a feud with Macho Man Randy Savage, but he's not around for much longer at all.
Inconsequential kind of.
Inconsequential, absolutely. Mr. Perfect returned from a year out of the ring due to a back injury and turned face by teaming with Macho Man at Survivor Series 1992. So, returning live, Mr. Hughes is in the ring. He gets the jobber entrance, no music, no walk down the ring. You're just in the ring when we go back to the arena. And Harvey Whippleman's with him, who I really liked his moustache. I thought he's done quite a good job on that.
He's quite a nice Weasley manager type as well.
So Perfect for his entrance gets a good pop, where Ross runs down his accomplishments, including being Larry the Axe's son. Perfect throws his towel and it lands perfectly on Hughes' shoulder, which I thought looked very good.
Yeah, it was a pretty cool moment.
I thought he reminded me quite a lot of Curtis Axel.
Well, funny that. I thought he reminded me quite a lot of Dolph Ziggler, but there you go. So, thoughts on this match?
Before we start, isn't this the first appearance of this brain scan that we have on? And
this is the only appearance of the brain scan.
It's like really loose Commodore 64 graphics appear on the screen. Has he got some sort of rudimentary graphics tablet or something he's drawing?
I believe so. It's been on...
Was that not with...
It appears several times, right?
I was not paying close enough attention to this pay-per-view. I apologise.
Yeah, it's been on other shows previously, and I think Jerry Lawler gets a go with it at various points, but yes, it's presumably some sort of rudimentary graphics tablet.
My initial thoughts, apart from his attire, my initial thoughts were Mark Henry. That same sort of, big sort of like tank person, but he's probably quite useless. Turns out he was a lot quicker and a bit more athletic than Mark Henry.
But I think in terms of ability...
But pretty terrible.
He makes Mark Henry look like Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as we all know, Mark Henry is currently my favourite wrestler ever. But it's taken him 15 years to get there, and there was a lot of just bumbling around, not doing anything. And I don't know whether you'd say that, let's say, Mark Henry in 1997, is he that much better than Mr. Hughes?
Hughes is just terrible in general. I think he can't sell. He doesn't make any attempt to. He struggles to take some of Perfect's offense. I mean, Perfect does the best he can with him, but I don't think he can get a great deal out of him.
I suppose this is my only experience of watching Mr. Hughes, and he was against Mr. Perfect, which I dare say is handy. If you're not that talented, to be in the ring with someone like that is probably quite useful.
Perfect sold quite well for him.
Yeah, Perfect did sell very, very well for him.
Yeah, somewhere Dolph Ziggler was sat with a notebook.
Yeah, If I could just do that, I would be all right.
For the finish, Perfect does his trademark neck snap, which always looks very good.
I think we're jumping something.
What have we missed?
We're jumping the picture-in-picture.
Yes, a picture-in-picture turns up of Bret Hart, which is just really odd.
I like it, certainly as in terms of context of the tournament, of saying, who would you prefer to face? I actually really like it.
Is it something that's happened before, or something that continues to happen again, or is it kind of isolated?
No, it's definitely happened before, and it'll definitely happen again.
I mean, I thought it was quite interesting in terms of... there is progression for it, but I thought it was still... It lacked charisma in that interview. It was very kind of straight face, lacked any energy.
Well, that's one issue that I've always had, like, with when you see like Bret Hart stuff. I like promos and interviews where they shout. I like the 80s style of, Warrior or Macho Man or something.
So you're going to like Hogan's later?
Yeah. I will do. I'll talk about that. But just yelling whatever you like at the camera, I think, is the way of just getting by. It doesn't even matter if what you're saying makes any sense, as long as you're shouting. It's fine, but Bret's a bit more cool with it.
Yeah, it's not his character to be a Hogan or a Warrior and shout and scream into the camera. Basically, Ross asks him who he'd prefer to wrestle in the semi-finals, and he picks Perfect. He says he's faced him before, and he'd prefer to go with technique and endurance over strength.
The better wrestler.
So, well, yes, the better wrestler, but pay attention to that, as that'll crop up again later.
Yeah.
So, for the finish, Hughes grabs the urn out of nowhere and whacks Perfect with it for the DQ at 6:02.
A really crap finish,
yeah.
I think. Like, really, really crap.
Are we really protecting Mr. Hughes? Does it really matter if he gets pinned?
He did have a good troubled look on his face after the urn shot.
True.
How many people have nicked the Undertaker's urn over the years?
I believe over the course of the next few years, it is the beginning of every single feud the Undertaker ever has.
Someone's had his urn again, and he ain't happy about it.
So you may want to keep a running tally.
I will do.
And Heenan, at one point during this match, does say that Bret Hart is the 14th of 13 children in the family.
Yes.
Which was, very amusing. But Hughes was terrible on offence. I thought it was a pretty boring match. Perfect couldn't really do a lot with him. He was bumping around where he could, and it's crazy to think with all his back problems dating back that he was still doing that, but he won't be doing it for much longer.
It's a kind of you can't polish a turd type of situation, isn't it? Really?
Absolutely.
You can't do anything with that.
But leave the memories alone, for that is Mr. Hughes' last appearance on our podcast.
Oh, well.
As a wrestler.
Yeah, I'm troubled by that.
It's been emotional.
You know?
Backstage, Mean Gene interviews Mr. Fuji and Yokozuna, who have a boombox in their locker room.
With a tape player.
With a tape
How
player.
I miss tape players.
I love the sort of, the pan up, and this guy's Japanese because, we go through bonsai trees and a Japanese flag and a Mr. Fuji, just to get it firmly on a head that this guy is Japanese and it's to him and he's Samoan.
In my notes, I have that Yokozuna's Japanese accent is very Samoan.
Yes, suspicious that,
Suspicious
isn't it?
that, yeah.
To be honest, it all fooled me because I didn't pick up on it.
And Mr. Fuji, I can't really understand what Mr. Fuji is saying.
This is a problem as part
I
of
like
Yokozuna.
his style, he's a good shouter, but the words, you can't really understand them.
This is a problem as part of Yokozuna's act, that he obviously can't really talk and Fuji can't really talk, but it is a problem they will have rectified by the next pay-per-view, so we'll see how they do that.
Are they going with the theme that actions speak louder than words?
I guess.
No, they get him a manager that can speak full English.
Okay.
Fuji gets very angry at Mean Gene, asking about the last time Yokozuna and Hogan met, and claims that Hogan cheated, and tonight he will see a wiser and bigger Yokozuna. So next up, we've got Bam Bam Bigelow versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Oh boy.
And in my notes here, I've got as the match title, Bam Bam versus fucking Hacksaw, which I guess says volumes about my memories of Hacksaw Jim Duggan and my disappointment to seeing him still knocking around in this.
Yes, he is very, very much a relic of Hulkamania era, and this is his last pay-per-view singles match until something ridiculous like 2007 when he has that
with Eugene or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Does he not come back and do some Cyber Sundays?
Cyber exactly. Bizarrely enough, Duggan had recently been in a television feud with Intercontinental Champion Shawn Michaels.
What?
Yes, they'd had a couple of matches on Raw, which culminated in a lumberjack match. It was kind of leading on to the perfect Shawn Michaels feud, but yeah, nonetheless, he was receiving Intercontinental title shots in 1993. Bam Bam Bigelow, as we said, debuted at the Royal Rumble 1993, but had been left off of WrestleMania 9 in a penned match against Kamala.
Now, I hadn't really seen Bam Bam Bigelow before. I knew of him and had seen pictures of him, but he looked good. I think Bam Bam Bigelow looks hard, doesn't he? Because his head's all tattooed. And you've got to be hard to have that done.
I really like the look of him. He just looks mean. I think he's got a good look for a solid wrestler.
Yeah, and he's very, very distinctive, isn't he? Like the whole sort of perception that's created. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, the flame-covered singlet, the flames on his head, tattoos on his head.
It's just the head tattoos that do it.
As far as
hard.
Yeah, it's just really hard.
As far as wrestler looks go, he's got a pretty good one. Hacksaw enters wearing a singlet, which is something new. But
I noticed he had a bit more of a paunchy gut than when I used to like watch in the late 80s.
Which may be something to do with it, yes.
Suck it all in there.
Yeah. He enters. Ross says he gets a tremendous ovation, and Brain says he has absolutely no idea why. He also did you notice he used his 2x4 to shoot Duggan before the start of the match?
I never really...
I did not notice it, didn't
Yeah, he's using it like a gun. Why does he carry a massive plank of wood with him?
I have absolutely no
Why
idea.
is he Hacksaw Jim Duggan? He doesn't carry a
Is he
hacksaw.
a
He carries a
carpenter?
plank. He carries a plank of wood. But it's an unusual thing, I think.
Maybe it's just running ring repairs if anything breaks down.
I think it's the crowd reactions that follow Hacksaw Jim Duggan that anger me the most. I hate constant USA chants, and I hate that sort of "oh" that he's always doing, even in the middle of moves. This was one point where he was sort of like he was doing sort of Irish whips and still just turned round to shout "oh" to the crowd. Why? Ugh.
It's just his thing that he does.
His thing irritates me.
One thing I noticed, Bam Bam has impressive movement for someone his size.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, he can jump around a bit for a big fella.
I was impressed by his performance in this. Although I've got to say that overall, my notes were just bored. It wasn't a match that I could get into at all.
Yeah.
I liked Bam Bam and what he did, but it wasn't an exciting match.
No, I noted down that Hacksaw Jim Duggan bites Bam Bam Bigelow's face at one point, which I think is very interesting.
Babyface tactics.
Babyface manoeuvres, yeah, a bit of face biting. That's
my main problem with this match, is Duggan selling. I mean, I don't know if it's a combination of either Bam Bam's arms are too short or Duggan's gut is too big, but when he's doing the bear hugs, he can't get his arms all the way round.
Yeah.
And as a result, Duggan's just kind of stood there looking, well, like you, Paul, bored, and occasionally turning to the crowd to shout USA. Ross and Savage claim that Duggan will never quit, and Heenan offers that in Glens Falls, his hometown, he's known as the quitter and the wimp of the town, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah. I guess I like Heenan's commentary. It's very, very good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Very consistently funny.
There's a valid reason he's held as one of the greatest colour commentators of all time. For the finish, Duggan finally manages a body slam on Bigelow after several attempts and goes for his 3-point stance finisher, but Bigelow moves and Duggan goes into the turnbuckle.
What is his 3-point stance finisher? What was that?
It's where he gets down for like a football stance and charges at them.
Oh, okay.
Believe it or not, that's his finish. Bam Bam hits a headbutt for the top for 3 at 4:59. I'm mildly impressed at him getting a clean pin on Hacksaw Jim Duggan, which is something that didn't happen often in the Hulkamania era. But yeah, not really much to it. Duggan didn't really sell. Bigelow looked to be doing a bit of comedy in places, which probably shouldn't be doing if they want to get him over as a killer heel.
I did like his top rope headbutt though. That was good. The way he just sort of like almost falls in perfect line onto him. That was pretty good.
And the way he actually jumps, because he doesn't stand with both feet together, it looks a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's not a stand, squat and jump, is it? It's a up and in one motion you're over, and I quite like that. It was interesting. Unique. Yeah.
Backstage, we cut to the Red Rooster, Terry Taylor, who's with the Steiners and the Smoking Guns.
Now this was another thing that had me, because I was like,
fucking
Billy Gunn is here now. He's here in 1993.
You'll be pleased to know that this is Billy Gunn's pay-per-view debut, and
I'm not pleased to hear that.
I'm delighted.
He will remain with us for the entirety of this, as obviously he's there.
He just doesn't go away. Yeah.
Rooster sounds ridiculously excited to be in the men's locker room, I must say. He does sound very pleased. He says that the pressure is on for the Guns facing Money Inc. and the Head Shrinkers as their first King of the Ring tournament, which I thought was odd, as obviously on television they're billing this as the first King of the Ring tournament, so surely it's everyone's first King of the Ring. Pretty generic promo from the Smoking Guns before we go to a relatively sane-sounding Scott Steiner.
That was sane?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay. That's putting things into context for me.
Scott Steiner is one of my favourite wrestlers, and I love what he becomes because he's such a nutcase. But it's very interesting for me now to see him here with like hair and not wearing a chainmail headdress, and he wasn't shouting. And I think I now know the reason why he started shouting is because you can't understand what he says. He kind of like stumbles all over his words, and maybe he found the way around that was just to yell everything in a really aggressive manner, which he clearly learned from Rick Steiner, because when we go to him, he just shouts his head off and barks like a dog. And that's dead good. You know.
I mean, I've got to say, I didn't understand a word of it, but I was very entertained by it.
Exactly, and that's the genius, the shouty 80s promo. It doesn't matter what you're saying. If you're shouting it, it's fine.
I think you might be right. Shrewd observation.
Yeah. And his moustache was kingly as well. It was
excellent. We then go to our final first round match, Tatanka versus Lex Luger. Tatanka is still selling an undefeated streak, which he's had since his debut in early 92.
Is that the undefeated streak that he's still got in about 2003 when he comes back?
No.
And when did he come back?
2006 he comes back. But trust me, this undefeated streak is not Goldberg-esque.
Okay.
Luger debuted in January at the Royal Rumble, brought in by Bobby Heenan as the Narcissist to face former Heenan protege Mr. Perfect. He has the gimmick of a steel plate embedded in his forearm, which he uses to knock out opponents.
I did wonder about that.
Yeah. He comes out looking like an astronaut. He's
got a space blanket on, hasn't he?
It's like he's just finished running a marathon. I was delighted by this. I thought we were going to get an astronomical.
Sadly, he's not got the Max Moon gimmick. However, if he could either run a marathon or come back from space with his hair still looking like that, now that is impressive.
That was a glorious mullet, and really, that's something we haven't brushed upon yet, but there are some phenomenal hairstyles in this pay-per-view.
Well, I'll come back to you later on that one, Adam. Yeah, in my notes it says, back live, the Narcissist enters great hair. They keep panning across to the throne on the entrance, which I thought was a nice little touch to just show what they all are actually competing for.
High quality set.
High quality set. No expense spared. or no expense spent on that one.
It was all from pound stretcher or something.
I've got to say, I do quite like, once he actually gets the ring, Lex Luger's kind of gimmick, with a full-length mirror,
I like it.
posing in it, I thought was really cool.
And he gets a pretty good heel reaction, because he is a massive dickhead, isn't he?
I don't know, I thought people were relatively apathetic about him.
I thought he at least got a reaction from him.
I thought as far as his physique goes, he looks big, but he doesn't look disgracefully big in the way that...
I think steroids are out, aren't they, at the minute?
Well, presumably, I mean, there might be a few people slipping under the radar, and I would wager that if there is, he might be one of them. But yeah, he looks big, but not in a warlord or barbarian sort of way.
He looks more sort of like chiselled than monstrous.
So Heenan raises that they're both currently undefeated, so I wonder what we could be looking at here.
Yes,
Brain brings up his brain scan once again, which shows a drawing of a monkey wrench in his forearm, which I thought was pretty funny. Before the match starts, the ref wants Luger to put on a protective covering on his loaded forearm. He poses for a bit and doesn't really want to put the pad on. Finkel then tells us that Luger has to put it on or he will be eliminated for the tournament. But
he took it badly.
He's not happy.
Yeah.
Heenan says they should tie Tatanka's shoes together so he can't dance to make the match fair. Tatanka sprints to the ring and it's on. Luger attacks him as he enters and throws Tatanka out. This, I noticed, was also the first match which didn't begin with a lockup, so it was nice to see something a bit different.
I like the way that he chucks Tatanka out the ring and then gets back to his mirror to do a bit of posing. I like that. The match has started, but he's still busy with his...
That's a good gimmick.
Yeah.
I must say, I did like this early on in this match when they did bring up the notion of time limit, as you kind of alluded to earlier, because they did mention that it was a 15-minute time limit, but Tatanka would apparently class that as 1/3 of a moon.
Yeah. Excellent. Speaking of Randy Savage's commentary, I get the feeling he sometimes begins sentences with no idea of where they're finishing.
Kind of how he cut promos as well.
True. He keeps babbling, and there's a sentence he says that goes, King of the Ring, prestigious, something.
If you say it in the Macho Man voice, it probably sounds a bit better.
Well, yeah. It probably has a lot more gravitas to it than mine. So they get a fairly hot open with throwing Tatanka out the ring. He re-enters and throws Luger's mirror on top of him. It then settles into what can loosely be described as a pace. I presume in wrestling, when you book a 15-minute draw, a 30-minute draw, or an hour draw, you inform the wrestlers of this and they plan what they're going to do in their sequences around building to something. And either if you are going to do a draw, you build to something like where someone hits their finisher and just doesn't get the 3 or something like that. This just went on. It was 15 minutes, but it felt like an hour.
It lost my interest. For at least the first 10 minutes, I had no interest in this match. There was nothing of note going on until they started bringing up the time limit, because that started coming up, I think, with 4/45 of a moon to go. They
How long is that?
Well, that's 4 minutes.
Right, 4/45 of a moon. At one point, Heenan claims Luger is ahead on points by 23,000 to 4. Again, no one really sells it, which kind of sucks. Monsoon would have, but Heenan and Ross don't. Tatanka's offense, all he really has is chops. They even go to repeating the Brett Razor armbar body slam stuff, which they did in their opening match. And it just kind of drags. I noticed Luger repeatedly adjusts his pants.
There's not really any holds or moves in it. There's someone looks like they're going to do something, then they get chopped or punched down, then they move slowly around and just do it again. So nothing ever has any sort of like momentum to it. It's just all very flat all the time. I think that's what makes it just last forever.
Yes, and for myself, the difficulty that I have watching this is that you're used to kind of planning things around a couple of big spots, but the big spots that we see in this era of wrestling aren't the same as the big spots that I'm used to seeing, and it takes a little bit of getting used to, and actually, because the peaks of the match are different to the peaks for a more modern match, so it takes a bit of getting used to.
Your big spot is like a top rope chop.
Yeah.
It's not...
Or a flip over.
Yeah,
that's to say that was a technical term.
I wonder if both of them are just so gassed from the start. They both do look completely out of breath after that fairly rapid first minute. I mean, I knew this was a 15-minute draw going into it, and I thought of all the people to choose to give 15 minutes to, they picked Lex Luger and Tatanka. Then the first minute happens, and I was kind of like, oh, maybe this will be okay because there's a good pace. You get the mirror tossing over spot, that kind of thing. And after that first minute, the following 14 minutes happened, and I remembered why. I thought, why would they give 15 minutes in the first place?
After they call after the commentators call the 4/45 of a moon, they count us down to 1/15 of a moon, 2/45 of a moon. So, and then they get to, what do they get to? 30th of a moon, and then a 90th of a moon.
Again, that's the problem with the end of the match, is that you would think the referee would be communicating, right, you've got 90 seconds left.
There's the countdown, but there's no urgency whatsoever. Like, Lex Luger's still moving at just a snail's pace with everything that he does. There's not even like a rush to get a pin.
No, it's like he doesn't know there's a time limit for this match at all. It's like he's just not being watching.
He thinks they're still on 5 minutes.
Yeah, and Tatanka can't see the moon.
I mean, so he has no idea. In my notes for the final minute of the match, I've got that Luger certainly isn't wrestling like there's a minute left. Savage covers for them by saying he wonders if they know the time. Luger suplexes Tatanka and adjusts his pants for a 2 count. He's been absolutely sucking wind in this match for ages. He gets a really shitty looking backbreaker and does another pants adjust for another 2, and that's the time limit. I suppose the other options for 15-minute draws were Mr. Hughes and Mr. Perfect and Bam Bam Bigelow and Jim Duggan, and I really wouldn't want 15 minutes of either of those.
Yeah, it's kind of there's no way to win, is there, really, with that sort
But
of
surely we could have done kind of... I know obviously they want to protect both men selling undefeated streaks. They could have done a DQ or a double DQ or a double countdown after 5 minutes and avoided 10 minutes of dullness. It's like they had enough to do a 4-minute match, but they were asked to do 15 minutes.
I think it was just the pacing towards the end. It didn't pick up, it didn't build, and you can excuse a lacklustre first few minutes of a longish time limit draw. But what's inexcusable is the last few minutes lacking any tension whatsoever.
Yeah, that's absolutely it.
It's sort of like the draw finish, so they're both out, and then just like Lex Luger take off the armband and drill to Tatanka.
Well,
it levels him down.
Basically, you get Finkel announcing that both men are eliminated from the tournament, and Bam Bam receives a bye to the final. Luger grabs the mic and, in a very winded fashion, claims he was just about to win. Maybe if you got a fucking move on, instead of adjusting your pants every 10 seconds, you would have. He then proceeds to cut what is kind of a babyface promo, which gets the crowd riled up, saying 5 more minutes. Then he blindsides Tatanka with his loaded elbow after taking the pad off, and that is that.
When because obviously I'm aware of
5
Lex
more minutes,
Luger.
a 9th of a moon.
1/9 of a moon, yes.
I'm aware of Lex Luger and what he becomes, sort of like the replacement Hogan type character. Does this bionic elbow thing ever recur again after he stops being the narcissist?
Yes, absolutely. It's something that comes up throughout his career.
So he's always got a heel weapon on him,
absolutely.
even though he becomes the biggest babyface type.
And can I be massively naive? Has he actually had any arm surgery?
Yes.
There's a scar on it, wasn't there?
But has he genuinely got screws?
Yes, he absolutely does.
Well, that kind of makes it a bit more interesting for me.
And are they handicapping Tatanka then by not having sort of an open top arena so he can register what kind of time into the match it is?
Well, I don't.
He
don't
must not know where he is.
I mean, they didn't really mention it's a whole lot of commentary in the last few minutes, but I didn't know if there's anything in the arena for the crowd and what they would know in terms of the time counting down. Because
it would be handy to have a
into
countdown, actually.
Yeah.
But also, the times that were announced didn't seem to make sense. I don't know whether it was just...
It was Royal Rumble time, wasn't it?
The laborious pace of the match, or the fact that when they said, it's 3 minutes to go, and then we waited 4 minutes, and then it was 2 minutes to go. And it just seemed to go on and on and on.
I'm not recognising the minutes as a unit of time anymore.
Yeah. I'm not sure what it really equates to in moons, mate. That's...
Okay.
Let's just all be thankful it's over and they're not still going with chin lock, forearm, pants adjust, 2 count.
Chin lock, chop, walk around,
Yeah. Next up, we go to our first semi-final matchup, which is Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect, which is a rematch of the Intercontinental title match from SummerSlam 1991, long considered a classic. The big difference here is that it's obviously a face versus face dynamic, as at SummerSlam, Perfect would have been a heel. So to set this up, backstage we get Mean Gene with Perfect and Bret Hart. Oakland is a massive shit stirrer.
He's just a twat, isn't he? Just trying to incite an argument between the two constantly.
Yeah, he says Bret earlier said he wanted to wrestle Perfect over Hughes because he'd be an easier opponent, which is not what he said at all. This riles Perfect up, though even Hitman denies it. Gene brings up that they are both second-generation wrestlers, and then they cut what I can only describe as an 8-year-old's promo.
My dad's bigger than your dad promo.
It picked up there for me.
Yeah, your dad could no way beat my dad.
I did like it where Perfect offered his hand to Bret and then took it away, as you say, like an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
That was great.
And continues to cut a promo as the Hitman's music plays and he leaves to enter.
Off, Perfect still like busting out a promo.
He also then finishes the promo by slagging off Canadians for no real reason, as they're not in Canada and it doesn't really matter. So when Bret comes out, the law of diminishing returns kind of means his pop isn't quite as big as it was earlier on, same for Perfect. And worth worth noting is that Brett has tape on his fingers from Ramon's stomps earlier on.
I didn't notice this until a bit into the match, after the match had started, actually.
They mentioned it towards the start, I think, on commentary.
I must have missed that.
What I noticed during the start of this was that a lot of crowd members seemed to be going up to get, snacks and drinks, and I'm thinking, why the fuck didn't you do this during Tatanka and Lex Luger? There was like whole chin locks. You could have got a drink, gone to the toilet, rang home,
and then you wait,
and then gone back, and you wouldn't have missed a single thing.
You wait for what, if you look at the list of matches, should be the standout match of the night to go and get your popcorn.
So, thoughts on this match?
I'll read kind of my notes, because I was too absorbed in this match to write many notes. But I said solid start. Good stuff, very good. And it just got progressively better. I liked this match. Again, I didn't think there was much in the way of massive, big spots that I was kind of, oh wow, that's amazing. But it was some great technical wrestling, it was absorbing, and I really enjoyed it.
And if the last match was an example of how not to pace a match at all, this was an example of how to pace a match very well.
This match had rest holds in it as well. You can kind of excuse that in terms of they're both wrestling for the second time that night. But yes, the rest holds didn't feel like...
They were meaningful.
Yeah, and they didn't... In Luger and Tatanka, it felt like moves were secondary to these rest holds, whereas these rest holds or submission attempts in this match kind of punctuate what else they're doing.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of the story. The rest holds that were in the other matches
were the story.
Wasters.
Yeah, I thought there were a couple of quite big spots in it. In where Brett gets pushed out to the
drinks
ring
bucket
apron and lands on the drinks bucket.
That was entertaining.
That was good. And when Brett suplexes Perfect over the top rope, which is quite a big spot for WWF 1993. I thought.
Although one of my favourite spots was the ref jump, Earl Hebner jumping over the competitors towards the end. That showed some real athleticism.
At one point, Brett goes for a Beal by grabbing Perfect's hair and throws him across the ring, and he goes crotch first into the ring post.
I've got to say, that must have been so difficult to execute well, to get the kind of slide going across at the right pace
and not puree your nuts
and in the right direction. I thought that was seriously good work.
Obviously in this match as well, it's a face versus face dynamic, which sometimes crowds find difficult then to latch on to someone to cheer for, but Perfect plays the subtle heel at various points. He invites Brett to get back in the ring and then kicks him as he gets back in, and just generally takes on the heel role from Brett.
It's subtle though. I had, as much as I enjoyed this match, I had a hard time getting into it like I would with some matches, because I didn't know who to root for. I wasn't really, not knowing the background of either of these guys particularly, I found it very difficult to really lose myself in the match and really root for one person. And that makes it difficult to really enjoy the match fully.
Was this the one as well? I've got salty past written down here.
Yes,
was this when Macho Man was banging about someone having it? Was it himself having a salty past?
No, Heenan brings up that Perfect has a salty past.
Right. Okay.
And that Macho would understand it, and then later on they bring up that Brett has a salty past.
Yeah, they keep talking about salty
past.
And Tabasco pasts and things like that.
Do you think they've been just left in brine?
I would give you a salty past. Interesting.
So going into the finish of this match, we get Brett doing his 5 moves of doom routine: atomic drop, leg drop, backbreaker, axe handle. Like I say, get used to this routine, you will see it. But obviously it's all executed very well and looks very nice. Brett's selling his leg. He's selling absolutely everything from everyone on this. He goes for the sharpshooter, but Perfect grabs his fingers, which I thought was quite clever, and stamps on them. Brett tries to block a Perfect plex and suplexes Perfect and himself to the outside. Perfect gets back in the ring first, followed by Brett. Perfect grabs an inside cradle for a 2, but Brett reverses it for the 3 at 18:56, or in Tatanka time, that would be...
Oh, give me a minute. Once it's got seconds, let me... Okay, hang on. What was it, 18?
Just aim for 19 minutes.
No.
18:56.
Well, you have to give me more.
Perfect goes to the outside in frustration. Brett now kind of walks a bit better, so I do wonder if he was either selling or playing possum a little bit.
Yeah.
Perfect re-enters the ring and offers a handshake, which Brett takes, and Perfect limps to the back. Started slow, but really picked up. Really liked this match.
Yeah, very, very, very good.
Nice to see 2 guys with really over-finishing holds having enough in their arsenal not to trade them 45 times.
Yeah.
That's something that kind of, I think, comes in with Rock and Austin at about WrestleMania 17, where for drama in matches you each have to take each other's finisher 10 times and kick out of them. We get 1 sharpshooter tease and 1 perfect plex tease, and that was it.
Yeah, we don't see them, do we?
No, we don't see either of them.
need to, I guess.
No. I kind of like the story that the announcers put over that Perfect was willing to do anything to win the match, and it was him that played the heel, but ultimately it was Brett who kind of takes the extra step by playing possum with his leg, maybe. Savage seems to, at the end, be so moved by the match he throws his hat and sunglasses off.
Yes, yeah, it did excite him quite a lot.
If you noticed that. Any calculations on the moons?
Well, so far I've got 1,136 over 2,700 moons. I'll simplify that down.
We'll come back to...
Do come back to me, yeah.
Come back to Scrivens later.
So next we go to Yokozuna and Hulk Hogan for the World Wrestling Federation title. Odd to see Hogan in the middle of the card, even when he hasn't had the title previous, he's always been in the main event ahead of it. See SummerSlam 1990 when he faced Earthquake above Warrior and Rude. He has barely appeared on television since winning the world title, as he was off filming TV series Thunder in Paradise.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah,
It was terrible.
He hasn't defended the belt at all. However, he had appeared on house shows tagging with Beefcake against Money Inc. He did have a singles match as part of an IWGP show in Japan where he defeated the Great Muta. He also conducted a post-match interview there where he claimed that the World Wrestling Federation belt was just a toy and he wanted the IWGP title. What a massive twat.
Yeah.
You've come back to a company, had its top world title on top of a killer monster heel that they built and their hard-working champion they've built, and there you are going, nah, this didn't really matter to me, I don't really want it.
It's in a long line of really twattish moves by Hulk Hogan, isn't it? It's not an isolated event.
Fortunately for us, this is all we'll see of him. We get some pre-recorded comments from Hogan. Jimmy Hart has Hogan's massive face on his back.
I really liked it. I liked Jimmy Hart's get-up. It was well, I wouldn't say classy, it was interesting though.
He does kind of wobble his back as if Hogan's face is nodding, which I thought
and we just get that camera and the camera shot of like the back of his jacket just goes on for ages.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
I note that Hogan looks way smaller than his late 80s peak.
There's no 24-inch pythons going on there.
He mentions having massive arms, but he doesn't mention 24-inch pythons.
No, he's not sell that.
He does his usual promo, brother, Hulksters, prayers, vitamins, etc.
It's good. I got a 5 on the brother count.
Well done
for this.
Well
done. It's a shame we have not got more Hulk Hogan stuff, so I could really
keep a running tally.
Keep a record of how many times he uses it. But.
We then get a short promo from Jimmy Hart, which is quite odd. We've never really seen Hogan with a manager.
And this is really weird for me because from when I watched the wrestling like late 80s. Hogan didn't have a manager, I don't think, and Jimmy Hart was thoroughly evil.
Yeah,
he was like the weasel that like hit people with his megaphone, and he had the nasty boys and people like that. So now I've got it's a very contrasting image. Hogan's still clearly a good guy, but he's got like Jimmy Hart hanging around with him.
Jimmy Hart's turned face prior to WrestleMania 9, and they continue kind of their relationship when Hogan goes to WCW. Jimmy Hart cuts his promo and says that Hogan has red, white and blue running through his veins and he was born and raised in the USA. So either he's already written the theme he gives Hogan in WCW or he got his notepad out immediately after finishing this promo. Hogan spouts more American cliches and claims Hulkamania is right up there with them, and he says that by crook or by hook he'll put Yokozuna down.
That's a bit of a heelish thing to say, I thought.
I've got the word just nonsensical for Hogan's promo. I enjoyed it.
Is that one word?
Well, it is here.
I don't know.
I quite enjoyed it, but I didn't really understand what he was going on about. Again, it's the 80s shouty promo, isn't it? He just yells things at the camera.
Paul, what did you make of it?
It was one of those ones. Again, at the minute, I'm finding these promos often quite entertaining, but I don't understand a word of it. But it doesn't seem to detract from it for me.
No, because the effort's all into the performance of it rather than what they're saying.
It's so over the top though. It does get me more pumped for the match than some of the ones like the Perfect Bret Hart one, which although I found it amusing, it didn't really kind of make me think, oh, I can't wait to see this match, even though I was looking forward to it. Yeah,
it's good at building sort of like anticipation for an exciting match, I guess. Because if the guy's that mental and worked up just to be yelling at a camera, then surely it's going to be an exciting match.
Well, yes, the match is in fact next in the middle of the card for the WWF title, featuring Hulk Hogan. Yeah. Okay, then.
I thought this was really odd. I thought I'd fallen asleep for an hour. I have got an update on the moons. I believe my initial calculations that 18 minutes 56 seconds is 284 over 675 moons.
Thank you very much.
Maybe we'll tweet to Tonka and ask him to do the conversion for us.
Yeah, maybe we should. That could be a
Check my
running thing.
calculations.
Yoko comes down, followed by Japanese photographers, and Ross claims they are documenting his movements as this is a huge cultural event in Japan.
Loads of photographers, and one very suspicious-looking, beardy, trampy photographer as well, who didn't fit in with the rest of the photographers.
I just wondered, though, if it was a huge cultural event in Japan or Samoa, maybe. I don't know. Or both.
I don't know, it's probably very offensive in Japan, I would have thought.
I did notice that one of the photographers looked suspiciously like Stato from Fantasy Football League. I don't know if you remember that show, but
I do not.
Ross,
Skinner and Badil.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
Ross says that Yokozuna is £550, bigger than he's ever been, and Heenan says that Hogan has trimmed down for speed. So that makes sense. Or maybe he trimmed down with speed. I don't know. One of the two.
Trimmed down because of that really expensive steroids trial that's been going on for a while.
Very possibly. Obviously, he gets a massive pop, probably the biggest pop of the night.
Yeah, but people are still happy to see Hulk Hogan. We've got a Hulk Hogan duplicate in the front row, haven't we?
Yes, we haven't actually mentioned this yet. There is a guy
Dressed exactly like Hulk Hogan.
Knee
I thought
pads,
it was
boots.
Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
He'd bought a front row ticket for his own WWF title defense pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And he was great during this match. We kept an eye on him. He was great because when Hogan's a bit down, he's up there sort of like G-ing the crowd up and trying to get them all involved, you know.
I enjoyed it. Maybe he had the blender.
Yeah.
This is pretty much typical Hogan formula match. Ross describes the pace as methodical and deliberate, and I guess that's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
Hogan bites Yokozuna in the corner.
He does, yeah, more babyface manoeuvres there.
The-
I don't know what it is about face biting from
Faces.
face characters in this pay-per-view. It's very odd.
Obviously, they kind of build around the fact that can Hogan slam Yokozuna, which he goes for at several points, but doesn't really manage.
And they keep mentioning this, right? Was this something... Cause is Lex Luger eventually the first person to slam him? Or does someone else slam Yokozuna?
Spoilers.
Oh, okay. Because they just seem to they just seem to be banging on about he could slam Yokozuna, and there's someone later on as well where they keep talking about it.
Spike Dudley.
No, it was with Crush as well. They keep banging on about how he could be the person to slam Yokozuna.
Yes, I believe they are
So
raising
this is a big.
They are raising this for a reason.
Okay, but that must spoiler.
Yeah, I will do.
Although I really doubt this will
Well,
be.
that's gonna
Anyone
make-
listening to this is going to be big news for them.
That's going to make the rest of what you said completely nonsensical.
We'll just cut out about 3 minutes there of it.
I noticed that Yokozuna goes for bear hugs, and Hogan actually makes the effort to sell them, so I will give him credit over Jim Duggan, who clearly couldn't be asked to even attempt to sell a bear hug.
Well, I did notice that during some of the moves that I thought if I was going to try and get out of them, I would be trying to stamp on Yokozuna's bare feet and crush his toes. I thought he missed a trick there, did Hogan.
Towards the end of the match, Yokozuna pins Hogan and he sends him flying for a kick out on 2, and he hulks up. He hits a big boot, but Yokozuna doesn't go down. A second one doesn't fare any better, but a third one does the trick. Hogan hits the big leg, but Yoko kicks out, and all three announcers sell it as a big happening. At that point, a photographer gets up on the apron.
It's the one with the beard!
The aforementioned
Beautiful.
suspicious
The one that looks like a villain turns out is a villain.
gets up onto the apron, and after Hogan has slammed Fuji off the apron, Hogan goes over to him, but the camera explodes in Hogan's face, and Hogan sells that he can't see. Yokozuna hits a big leg drop and gets the 3 to reclaim the title at 13:09. Any moon calculations there?
13:09, you make it awkward. Hang on.
And it is a big leg drop. I would
Yes.
say, Yokozuna's leg drop does look painful.
For someone his size, it is impressive that he can get off the
Ground,
basically.
Yeah. He is a big fella.
He is a big fella. 13 minutes, it felt a lot shorter than Tatanka Luger. I don't know if that's because the crowd were more interested or...
The crowd pull it along, definitely. But I just think it was marginally better crafted and performed.
Yes, I'd go along with that. Hogan sells the eyes after the match by rolling around the mat, but Zuna drags him to the corner and hits the bonsai drop. And that is it.
There were some great crowd reactions though. Firstly, the shock on secondary Hogan's face in the crowd was
God.
something to behold.
And it really took the wind out of his sails
It did.
until the main event, I think.
I don't think he even cared at all after that.
I think I saw him get back up into it during the final, but he was definitely...
He was upset.
He was like the thinker, head on fist. Sort of.
But, and there was some little boys facing the crowd that look very, very sad. Their kind of world has been changed forever.
There was a little boy with a wrestle buddy.
Yes.
I noticed. So I definitely had one of those when I was a kid.
But-
Brought back a lot of memories for me.
But yeah, that's it. Yokozuna has squashed Hulkamania, and it is dead to the World Wrestling Federation until 2002.
So he's gone now.
He is gone. He sticks around for a little while. He fulfills some live event commitments. Again, tagging with Beefcake against DiBiase and IRS. But nope, no more television appearances. That is him done.
Wow.
Jimmy Hart attends to him and helps him to the back, and Yokozuna celebrates in the ring with the photographers. Backstage with the Red Rooster, he catches up with Mr. Perfect, who says he doesn't really want to talk about the match with Bret Hart earlier. Kind of a pointless little promo, not really sure why it was there. However, we then go to Mean Gene, who is with Shawn Michaels and Diesel.
I loved this because it's a different Shawn Michaels, isn't it? And I've heard loads of the stories.
I didn't like this because it was a different Shawn Michaels.
I loved it because I've heard all the stories and I've seen bits and bobs about how Shawn Michaels was just an unpredictable, colossal wanker for years and years, and I'm quite pleased that we're finally getting to see it, and it is very, very obvious how much of a twat he actually is. Even during like his introduction by Mean Gene, just his sort of like gurning and facial expressions, like he's just had a pound of crack. And it's brilliant.
I even noticed he was chewing gum like a prick.
Yeah.
He could even make that, dickish. I also love Kevin Nash's mullet.
Yeah, that's pretty fearsome. Is this what, like, how long's Kevin Nash for? As long as Diesel... Because I noticed they named him here, didn't they?
Yes, yeah. He's been around a matter of weeks. Basically, on the same episode of Raw as when Razor loses to the Kid, Shawn loses the Intercontinental title to Marty Jannetty. A couple of weeks later on a house show, he beats Marty for it with the aid of Diesel. So he's literally been here weeks. This is his first pay-per-view appearance. As the story goes, literally Shawn was sat at home watching WCW, saw Nash on TV, thought he looked good, and basically rang up Vince and said, yeah, hire that guy. And they did. That was that. Gene asks Shawn about his title defence against Crush. Shawn claims that Hogan is not the same calibre of superstar as Shawn Michaels is, and that Hogan is a dinosaur. He asks about Shawn's bodyguard / insurance policy, who he clumsily names as Diesel. Slightly disjointed, I thought. I don't really think he knew where he was going.
Probably all the amphetamines that he's on.
Yeah.
Did they just did he just kind of pick a random name out of the air there?
Was this actually just the naming of Diesel? No one knew what he was called, and Shawn Michaels has just blurted something out.
I don't know. So our next match in the spot of death following Hogan is the Smoking Guns and the Steiner Brothers against Money Inc. and the Head Shrinkers, which is, sadly enough, pretty much the entirety of the tag division at this point. Money Inc. are the tag team champions. The Smoking Guns debuted in April following WrestleMania. The Head Shrinkers have been around since late 92, and the Steiners also. The Smoking Guns fire fake pistols into the air. I just wondered if good guys fired guns. Is that an American thing?
Well, probably.
And I just kind of thought the Money Inc. and Head Shrinkers didn't really fit as a unit. They wouldn't have any common interests, I don't think.
No. Well, maybe IRS could go over the Head Shrinkers' taxes or something like that.
Yeah, possibly.
I have got an update on the moons. 13 minutes and 9 seconds I've got as 263 over 900 moons.
There's definitely got to be a moon watch.
Yeah. Moon watch, moon clock. I'm Dragon's Den, here I come.
Yeah, there wasn't a great deal going on here.
Was it just like a thrown together match?
Well,
it kind of had a little bit of that feeling.
Like I say, I think it's pretty much the 1993 equivalent of a Divas match.
Yeah.
Kind of between big matches. The crowd do seem relatively dejected following all the Hogan business. At one point, Ross references that IRS is one of the greatest tag team wrestlers in history and has held the titles with 3 different partners on 4 different occasions. So I'm not sure if anyone's made Jim Ross aware of kayfabe, as IRS only debuted 2 years prior and has only ever tagged with the $1 Million Man. Yeah, the finish of this match is DiBiase and Billy Gunn. DiBiase goes for a power slam, but Billy Gunn gets an inside cradle for the 3 at 6:49.
Quick match.
Very quick match. I did blink and I did miss it.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance really to get into this one.
All 4 teams brawl after the match and the faces clear the ring. They're, like I say, nothing to it. Rick Steiner, I don't know if you noted, didn't even actually get into the ring, so I imagine that was the easiest night's pay he's ever got. It doesn't really recapture the magic of the Steiner brothers in the 1993, who were just killing jobbers repeatedly on Raw. Now, I would have been quite happy with them sticking that on pay-per-view.
Yeah, I would have loved that.
Bit of a Steiner screwdriver or something. 3 minutes, job done.
It feels like we haven't talked about this match, but that is literally all there is to say.
There's not a lot to say about it, is there?
There's nothing in it.
The fact that Rikishi was in it, that was interesting.
My one note of this match is Rikishi did a good kick.
Yes, Rikishi before he piles on about £200. That's interesting to see.
Yeah, I've got Ross bringing up that Billy and Bart have rodeoed professionally, and that Billy had a rodeo scholarship to Houston State at Texas. Brain remarks, do you know anybody that didn't go to school? Which I thought was pretty interesting. Again, Ross does nothing
Just
for
ignores
it.
it.
Yeah, nothing to see there. Next up, Mean Gene is stood by with Yokozuna, Fuji, Jack Tunney, and some Japanese photographers. Gene points out that Tunney was stood by watching, and Tunney congratulates Yokozuna on winning the match. What the hell? Did he not watch the same match? This guy's supposed to be the storyline president of the company, and he didn't notice that his champion's been cheated out of the title on pay-per-view in a match he allegedly watched.
Sloppy. Very sloppy.
Yeah, he's pretty incompetent at his job, his old Jack Tunney. Fuji cuts a barely comprehensible promo.
I couldn't actually understand what he was saying.
He shouts bonsai at one point.
Yeah, I kind of picked that up.
An English-speaking manager cannot appear soon enough for this act, and I think at this point Vince realises it. Fuji says that Hogan and America are done.
Wow,
there you
finished
go.
off America with this one act, has he?
So, next up, we have our Intercontinental title match, Shawn Michaels versus Crush. Shawn captured the Intercontinental title in October 1992 from the British Bulldog and has been champion since, bar a 3-week switch with former Rockers partner Marty Jannetty in May-June. Since capturing the belt, he has switched managers from Sensational Sherry to Luna Vachon to introducing Diesel just 2 weeks prior to this show. Crush has received a strong babyface push since re-debuting in May 1992, and Shawn is still kind of feuding with Marty Jannetty and Mr. Perfect, and Crush's issue with Doink the Clown, which stems prior to WrestleMania, hasn't really been resolved, so there's no obvious reason that these two should be facing each other on pay-per-view. They had faced each other in a King of the Ring qualifying bout on the 22nd of May All-American Wrestling, which finished in a double count-out, which led to WWF on-screen president Jack Tunney eliminating them both from the tournament.
My first thoughts about this was when Crush came out. His attire was a bit in your face.
Yeah, it's clashing with clashing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a little bit too zany.
So it says the man wearing those trousers.
Wow.
I know you can't see those at home, but they're special.
That they are.
I thought the best part of Crush's whole act is his music. It's very 80s.
No, his hair's the best part
Well,
of his act.
yes.
I noted his hair, the front part of his hair is a bank manager, the back part of his hair is a roadie's.
Yeah, it's just a ferocious hair.
I've written that his mullet is resplendent.
Yeah, we're all big fans of his hair.
The crowd still aren't really reacting to things. I think they're still in shock over the whole Hogan business, and this is the problem.
Certainly Mr. Hulk Hogan looks dejected in front row.
This is the problem, I think, sometimes with putting a big angle in the middle of your show. It sucks the wind out of most things following it. Next out is Shawn Michaels, and I've got noted that he was wearing some sort of proto-Scott Steiner gear.
Shawn Michaels, his entrance was just fucking crazy as he sort of saunters and dances his way down to the ring. It's entertaining, but it's not the movements of someone that is sound of mind.
I also liked Nash's white studded jacket.
Yeah, Nash was pretty good just as the tall, imposing bodyguard type
Yeah,
character,
he pretty much fits the role.
And Michaels is good. I wouldn't take that away from him. He doesn't look like he's playing with a full deck, but he is good.
JR gets over Crush's strength, and Savage says Crush could slam Yokozuna. I wonder if that will come up at any point.
Yeah, and that was mentioned several times during this match, I think.
I was impressed by Crush's strength. I mean, I've
he's
not
a
seen
big
him
guy.
talk before.
Big guy.
He's a big guy, and at one stage he just throws HBK across the ring, and he did look an absolute beast.
But he is kind of, as a performer, he's a little bit clumsy, I think, a bit slow, not really very fluid.
I think as a look, he's got exactly everything they're looking for in terms of size, agility, mullet.
Yeah, they do refer to him being the total package there. But that package doesn't include wrestling skill. Yeah.
That's pretty much the story of the match, is that Crush is very strong and Michaels dances around him, basically.
Michaels does some lovely selling for him. Shades of that Hogan match from
SummerSlam 2005.
Yeah, it was a ridiculous one. I think he took a kick and went all the way across the ring and then out the ropes onto the floor. It was it was lovely.
At one point I noticed that Crush did a big boot and a leg drop for a 2 count, and I wondered where he got that finish from. Don't know if he'd seen it anywhere before. Paul, your thoughts on this?
On the match as a whole?
Yeah.
I just like the bit where the doinks come down.
Yes, well, that is the finish. Crush clotheslines Michaels to the outside as 2 doinks appear in the aisleway, which wakes the crowd up. They taunt Crush before Michaels sneaks back into the ring, super kicks Crush in the back of the head. He bounces into the turnbuckle, falls back, and Shawn gets the pin at 11:14. I shan't ask you to calculate that in moons.
Why are there two Doinks?
Again, this is an issue dating back to WrestleMania. There was a match between Doink and Crush where there were two Doinks, basically.
Okay.
Not a great deal to see here either. I thought the Doinks are great on the outside, acting in stereo. They were very funny. After the finish, they sort of cheekily run to the back and Crush saunters after them. Sean bumps around nicely, but not a great deal to it.
It was watchable, not a classic.
Yeah. So next up, Gene interviews Bam Bam, who's as fresh as a daisy, and says he has the opportunity to be the first king of the ring. Yep, that's pretty much what's going on here, Bam Bam. You correctly understand what this match is for. Obviously, he's not wrestled the semi-final, as Luger and Tatanka went to that thrilling draw. Meanwhile, Brett has had two relatively gruelling matches against Razor Ramon and Mr. Perfect.
Sorry, 11 minutes, 14 seconds is 337 over 1350. Sorry, I said that in a terrible way. 337 1,350ths of a moon.
Seemingly, telling the time as a Native American is really complicated.
Yeah, well, you can't help but think their youngsters would be better mathematicians.
Okay, so it's time for the main event. Bam Bam enters, and Savage says the winner of this match is the guaranteed number one contender for Yokozuna's world title. Spoilers, that doesn't happen. There you go. Brett is out to a decent pop, slightly limping, and the announcers reference this and his damaged fingers. So, what did we think of this final?
I thought it was alright.
I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I thought Bam Bam's bear hugs were very good.
Yeah, the
certainly
lifting up and over.
Yeah, certainly
his backbreakers were quite good.
Yeah, certainly with someone who was much more cooperative than old Jim Duggan earlier on. He focuses a lot on like different areas of Brett's body with headbutts and clubs and really works him over, and Brett really sells like a champ for the whole thing.
Yeah.
He wrestles like and sells like somebody who's been in two quite gruelling matches already.
Yeah, but but within that, although he looked like he'd been in those tough matches, his stamina was still good and his endurance was still good, and he showed himself as a
Yeah, towards the end when he has to show a bit of fire, he does bring it.
It's kind of the advantage of this wrestler. He's not over encumbered by just shitloads of muscle like some of your previous eras, people who really couldn't have much more than a 5-minute match because they were just knackered.
Now, I did notice one of the signs in the crowd at this point. Bam Bam Pigolo.
Yeah, it was a nice touch.
There weren't that many signs in the crowd.
No, because signs are a really, really prominent feature of the Attitude Era from when I was watching it then. But not so much here. There's a couple, but it's not taken off in any meaningful way, I don't think.
At one point I noticed that Bam Bam tries to whip Brett into the guardrails on the outside, but Brett reverses it, and Bam Bam almost takes out some woman in the front row by crashing into her through the guardrails. Bam Bam body slams Brett on the concrete, and while the referee admonishes him, Luna comes out with a chair and hits Brett with it before she runs to the back like what I can only describe as a pantomime villain.
Yeah, what was she always dressed like that at this point?
At this point, yes, this is her gimmick.
It's just really, really bizarre.
Bam Bam rolls Brett back into the ring, scoop slam and diving headbutt from the top for the 3 count for Bam Bam. Bam Bam Bigelow is your king of the ring. Good night, everybody.
And
I was very confused.
I was very confused because I had never heard of a King Bam Bam.
Well, Earl Hebner runs out, presumably from selling merchandise in the parking lot, and tells Joey Morella that Luna whacked Hitman with the chair. Now, this was interesting to me in that why didn't he run out during the Hogan match?
I should say that guy had an exploding camera.
Yeah, give him some time to wipe his eyes and we'll start again.
Yeah. I did also like his mind for hitting somebody with the chair. I think he's missed a career opportunity.
Yes, he's perfected that art. The referees tell Fink, and Fink reverses the decision. Not reverse the decision, the match must continue. I don't really see how this is helpful to Brett. He's still been whacked with a chair. Only it's now 90 seconds ago rather than 30 seconds ago.
Yeah.
But, well, we could have done that in moves, but we'll move on.
Yeah, Bam Bam goes back with the headbutts, goes for a senton at one point, and Brett rolls out of the way, which I thought was quite a cool little spot. He retains the advantage and goes back to the backbreaker where he was holding him over his shoulder. Brett, at one point, bites his face.
Yeah, I've got that as well. That's 3 occasions in this pay-per-view where you've got the face character biting the face of their opponent.
Maybe they've been starved.
Maybe there's no cage.
Are they trying to make face biting like a good guy manoeuvre?
I guess so. For the finish, Bam Bam whips Brett into the corner and charges at the Hitman, but Brett kicks at him. Bam Bam stumbles back. Brett gets onto the top ropes, jumps onto Bam Bam's shoulders, and grabs a victory roll for the 3 at 18-11.
I thought it was going to be an electric chair drop or something at this point. I was quite surprised, and then the victory roll came.
It was a smooth finish.
Yeah, it was smooth.
It was good.
One thing I thought that was really interesting for Brett throughout this whole pay-per-view, and we briefly mentioned it earlier, is this man wins 3 matches on the same show without using a finisher once.
Yeah, we don't see a sharpshooter.
We don't
do
see
we?
a sharpshooter at all, which I guess just shows kind of the versatility of what he can do. I kind of miss the days when matches would finish with things that weren't finishers.
Yeah.
The most recent
Yeah.
example I can think of that is the Daniel Bryan John Cena match at SummerSlam with the knee, which at the time wasn't established as a finisher. Obviously, it has been since, but at the
Yeah.
time it was very out of nowhere. So I liked that. But yeah, Bret gets the victory roll for the 3, and Bret Hart is King of the Ring 1993. Savage gets in the ring to congratulate him. Thoughts?
Good ending, competent match. Seemed like a good way to finish. Still didn't have the crowd reaction of the Hogan match.
No, but I was surprised how into it the crowd were, actually. I thought they'd done well to come up from, obviously, what would have been a massive shock at the time, to get back up for it. I think the workers did a good job.
Yeah.
I do wonder the motivation for putting the King of the Ring segment on last as opposed to the title match. Was it that Hogan didn't want to stick around and watch the whole tournament, or did they want you to go away with the memory of the big angle coming out of this is the King of the Ring?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was the first time they'd done this pay-per-view. They've got to put it over. If you do a new pay-per-view with a new gimmick and then you just do something else as the main selling point of it.
True.
And coming back to that, what we said at the start with the King of the Ring that we know, the King of the Ring 98, with the Hell in a Cell and the First Blood match, where the King of the Ring is just not really known about.
Yeah.
It's a really kind of poor relation to the rest of the card. Then I guess it is nice that I say that the actual gimmick of the pay-per-view is put over.
Yeah, so it kind of gets lost along the way, doesn't it, really, the actual King of the Ring?
Yeah. But I like this match. I thought it was decent.
Yeah, it was good.
It was probably not as good as the perfect match, but yeah.
I enjoyed the aftermath as they walked up to the little kind of celebration area with the throne and the crown.
Which all looks like it's been bought from a local 99p store. But yes, following the victory, Bret is ushered...
Would it not be a 99-cent store?
A 99 or a $1.99 store, I suppose. Bret is
that what they are in America?
I guess,
No,
maybe. I don't remember seeing any, but there you go. Bret continues to sell fatigue as he's ushered up the aisleway to Mean Gene, who crowns him King of the Ring. Immediately, we get an interruption from Jerry the King Lawler, who claims himself as the real king of the World Wrestling Federation, and he'll let Bret be a prince if he gets on his hands and knees and bows to the real king and kisses his royal feet. Bret slightly stumbles over his words and says that Lawler didn't have the guts to enter the tourney and that Lawler is the Burger King. The crowd comes alive to chant Burger King. They really like that, and Lawler will get that chant for years.
Burgers are available from other good outlets.
Yes, they are indeed. Lawler twats Bret with the scepter and beats him down and stamps on Bret's crown and throws the throne at him.
Yeah,
That's what I call a chair shot.
I liked it. He gave him a real good working over it. It was a real dick manoeuvre.
Yeah,
Jerry Lawler was an excellent twat there.
He trashes the entire set, which is quite Spartan to begin with.
It was more of a tidying up.
Yes. He forces Bret to kiss his feet by kind of rubbing his face on his boot. I guess that constitutes kissing.
Yeah.
And the pay-per-view ends with Bret kind of half falling down some stairs.
It's a dark finish.
It's a dark...
Some might say.
Well, it's a big angle as a main event rather than having a main event. So I thought that was interesting and not really something the WWF has done before.
How long has Jerry Lawler been around for at this point?
Only since late 1992, early 93.
So he's still fairly new.
Yeah, he's entered the Royal Rumble. He's been a commentator mostly on Superstars, but this is certainly his first big in-ring angle. So, that's it. That's your show. That's King of the Ring 1993. Thoughts? Did you enjoy this pay-per-view?
Overall, it was... I'm a bit lukewarm on it, I think. I think it was alright, but it did have some real sort of like bad elements to it. I thought, the Duggan match was terrible. The Luger match was terrible. I think, man, there were drags on the quality really of what you could get. But it wasn't a bad pay per view. It was interesting.
Paul?
Well, it's 3 2/3 moons. Length of pay per view. I thought it was good.
It was. I'd say what was nice because I didn't realise that we were going to get the last pay per view appearance of Hulk Hogan until he returns, obviously in the next millennium. That was quite interesting to see. Like finally, sweep him off, he's gone. And, now we'll see what happens, and how much of a void is left.
Well, I've got to say, as a whole card, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the wrestling on it. It will take me some getting used to the different presentation of the product, but I thought it was enjoyable, and I'm looking forward now to see how this era, the new generation, develops.
Yeah, I enjoyed the show for the most part. Obviously, yes, there were some things that dragged it down, but yeah, on the whole, relatively enjoyable. Saved by a few decent matches, and one man in particular. So with that, we'll go to Adam. Your favourite match and your MVP for the show?
I think I'm going to have to say Perfect and Hart as the best match of the night. But I was very impressed by the Razor Ramon one as well. The best performers, there's no one else, is it? It's got to be Hart. 3 good matches kind of saved it.
Paul?
Ditto. I mean, Brett was clearly the star of this show. I'd say 3 really good performances. Enjoyed watching him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if we'd have seen the dart match before, my opinion might have been different.
Yes, had we seen Papa Shango, obviously things would be very different.
Yes.
Just coming back to Paul, your favourite match of the night?
Exactly the same. It was Mr. Perfect.
Well, that makes us all agree on everything.
Unanimous decision.
Unanimous decision. Yeah. Best match was clearly Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect, and man of the night was clearly Bret Hart. Carries the show from start to finish. Has 3 quite different matches against 3 quite different opponents. Involved in a big angle at the end.
I hadn't even picked that out. He did bookend the show, didn't he?
Yeah, he starts the show and he finishes the show. And
busy night for him.
Busy night.
Might say. Yeah.
He will wrestle multiple times on more than one pay-per-view during this era. So we'll see how they utilise him in that way. So from Paul Scrivens.
Bye-bye.
And Adam Wax.
Bye-bye.
I'm Stuart Brooks saying goodbye, and I'll leave you with a song for next time.
Nobody does it better.